So we're now ready to sand the fretboard down. We're going to remove the filling that we've put on the mother of pearl inlay and then just confirm we've got the good radius on the fretboard. Just holding the block straight along the line so we don't roll the curvature. It shouldn't require too much effort. Now we're now down to the pearl. Looks good. You can see there's just bits where it's not changing the colour. There's a little bit there and a little bit there. It's so close. And a few goes and we just got a little bit of a patch here. You can just see the difference in the colour. That's just, that little bit there is just to go. Okay, right, we just checked there and we've got a nice even colour on the board. It's evenly abraded and we're just there. So now what I'm going to do is we've got a very sharp edge on the end of this fretboard and I just want to roll this sanding block over just to round over those edges. It's only going to take 2 or 3 runs to do that. Yeah, it's taking it off. And then, I mean, ultimately you will be doing some sanding by hand with a spoke shave, you know, that work. So then you can just do that a little bit more if necessary. But it just gives it a good, nice line, rounded line. Let me just check that that's nice and rounded. So we've nicely rounded the edges off the fretboard there. So now we're just going to move through some lighter grades of abrasive and get this really nice and smooth. So we're about there. Obviously it's very, very dirty stuff this, so until we've cleaned it we can't really see for any imperfections, but you know, it's fine. We're now fretting. We're going to cut our fret slots to the correct depth and then we're going to press our fret wire into the fretboard. We want to find out how deep the fret tang is. When you buy the fret wire you should know how deep it is, but it's always worth checking it just in case. Or maybe you've got fret wire and you don't know how deep it is. So we're just going to measure the total depth of the fret. We've got 2.68, 2.6, you know, about 2.7. And it's easier with the fret feeler gauges to measure the crown. We've got 1.34. So that means we've got a fret depth of about 1.3, something like that. So we want to cut the slot to about 1.5 millimeters. If you have the slot too shallow, the fret won't seat properly, then you've got a real problem lifting the fret out. You'll damage the fretboard, so make sure you cut it deep enough. You can always fill the ends of the fret slot itself, so 1.5 millimeters. So when you cut the depth of the slots on the fretboard, you can mark the edge of the fretboard to the depth you want to cut to, or you can use a fret saw with a guide. And this guide moves along parallel to the edge of the blade, so that makes it much more controlled. So what we do is just take the calipers and put the end of the caliper down. We're just going to run that onto the blade and then move it up until we get our required depth of about 1.5 millimeters there. So we can even mark the blade there with that position and double check it along a couple of positions. We've got 1.57 there, so open it up again. I mean, this is really critical. 1.57, 1.6, really critical to get this depth the right depth. So we've set that, we can tighten these up and then we can cut our slots. Okay, so carefully feed the saw into the slots. We don't want to scratch the board and just work it out. They're going to be fairly close to the depth, but with the radius of the board they'll probably be a little bit shallow at the edges, and that's the real place where your frets never want to go. So I think we've just about got that. Right, they're all okay. So I'm just going to mark the fret wire up before I bend it, and each piece wants to be about a centimetre longer than the width of the fret at that position, so that we've got 5 millimetres either side overhang. That helps the fret get bent down properly into the fretboard. Right, this wonderful piece of equipment allows you to bend your fret wire into a radius that's the same as the radius of your fretboard. In fact, the radius we will make is a little bit tighter than the fretboard radius, so that it really fits in tightly when we press the fret wire in. So what you do is you feed the fret wire in with the fret tang upwards, and that goes into a groove on this top wheel, and then you can turn the wheel as you force the wire in, and once it gets going, works quite easily. It sort of pulls itself in once it's going. There we go. And you turn the handle. Isn't this wonderful? It's like making pasta or something like that. And as you turn, you normally clamp this to the edge of the bench, but and we now get there we go. And that's got something like a 7-inch diameter, and we're after a 9-inch radius, so it's quite tight. If you do this by hand, you don't get such an even curvature, but there we are. That's ready to be cut up into pieces to press into the fretboard. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 20. 2.
Have we extended our neck?
4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. I thought I'd... right.
Spares.
Spares, that's it. We're now going to press the frets into the fretboard rather than hammering them. If you hammer a fret into the fretboard, you tend to get a little bit of recoil, so it's sometimes quite hard to hammer the frets into the fretboard. The fret press is the best way to do it. So we'll take our first fret and to place that into the slot. So we see we have that little bit of the overhang either side. Give it a little tap, not much, just a little tap, just to start it off in the edges of the slot. The fret's standing proud in the middle by about a millimetre. We're still using our offcut from the wood, and we'll keep that behind the wood. There's a grub screw in the middle there, so that allows us to see where the centre of this press is. It roughly goes onto the fret, fits the slot, and then we can just hold this to stop it turning, and then you turn it, you just support it either side, and as you press it in, keep your eye on it, and you'll see that that fret will then just level out and press nicely in. What you can do is then remove the press a little bit and move it to the edge of the fretboard and give it a press on the edges if it's not sitting really tight. But that's usually if your radius of your fretboard isn't matched to the radius of the cowl. But if everything's matched up, then it should be a really nice clean press, firm, and you'll never pull that out without destroying your fretboard. There we go. 24 frets nicely pressed into the fretboard. To cut the fret overhang back to the fretboard, we're going to use these fret wire cutting tools, and these cut right at the end of the tool, which means there's very little overhang left after we've cut them back. So I'll bring the cutters into the edge of the fretboard. Don't want to pull or twist, so you support the back of the cutters with your thumb and then snip and work your way along. Last one. Okay, right, there we are. Now we're going to file the edges down with a fret file, which is this block here, and we're just going to run that down the edge until we've got those flush to the edge of the fretboard. Just getting it until it just meets the edge of the fretboard. We will actually file a little bit of the edge of the fretboard, but that's fine because it's a fairly fine file. And it just almost slides against the wood and you don't hear the metal anymore. So that's those all done, and we can move on to the next section. Good. Right, now we can clean up a little bit and then we can bevel the ends of the frets. To bevel the ends of the frets, we can use our flat file placed on the ends of the frets at a slight angle, or we can use a special fret beveling tool which has got a file set at 35 degrees in this case. It's in a plastic block. The plastic block runs smoothly on the top of the frets while we do the filing. There we are. Then we're going to show you how this runs. This is one that's not been quite taken down to the full bevel. And if we move up to the end here, we can see one that has been taken down to the full bevel. You see we've got this nice flat bottom to the bottom of the fret itself, nice and flat, and then we go to the fret tang, move along. It's another one that's been done, and then this one's not quite been done. We've just got at the bottom here a little bit of fret wire over the edge of the fretboard, and that's just ready to come away. And once that's been filed away, then we've completed the bevel. See, the other one's got a little bit left there as well, and that one's been done. See how square that bottom of the fret is. Okay, so just a couple of more runs on there since the last check, and I'm just going to come in and check with our goggles. That's good. Okay, right, they're all done. So we can clean up the board a little bit, and then we can file down the ends of the fretboard to get rid of the sharp tangs there. Okay, I'm just going to mask the fretboard off so that we don't mark it while we do the cleaning up of the ends of the frets. I'll just mask it as I go rather than do it all. So you find that you have to move your tape away because it's a bit wide. And I just use one file for both operations. The first one is to file the end of the frets at the same 35-degree angle, just to get rid of the scratches made by the fret beveling file. Doesn't need much work, just a few runs is enough to take it off. And then we're just going to file at an angle at the end there to get rid of the burrs that have been left. And that's done, ready to go on to the next one. 47 to go. This file has got a safe edge at the bottom so it won't file into the fretboard, and the masking tape will protect it as well. We're now going to show you what the ends of the frets look like once we've filed them down. This is a fret that hasn't been filed yet, and you can see the horizontal scratches from the fret beveling tool and this very sharp edge to the fret here, and these will give us a very sharp edge which will pull when we run our finger over it. And then as we move along, we see one that we've filed down. We see we now have the vertical scratches from the much finer file that we've used, and then around the edge we've just rounded this off to give us a nice, get rid of those sharp edges, and it gives it a nice round even bevel.